The wind battered against the pine trees like a warning. The storm had rolled in without much grace, sharp, angry, and colder than usual for late autumn. In the foothills of what used to be known as the Cascadian Free Range, nestled in the shadow of broken satellites and half-reclaimed Earth infrastructure, Corvin closed the heavy wood and metal door of his cabin with a grunt. Another day, another skirmish avoided. He tossed his coat onto the rack, noting the faint crackle of ice forming along its shoulders. Global weather patterns hadn't recovered since the orbit rings fell. Not that he missed them. They were more symbol than solution, promises from orbit that rarely delivered down here. Corvin didn't like promises. He lived alone. By choice. The cabin was hand-built from the remains of 2 prefabs and whatever he could salvage from derelict settlements nearby. It was warm, quiet, and stocked well enough for another month of solitude. He made contact with trade convoys once every 2 weeks, just enough to stay informed, not enough to feel watched. The kettle hissed. He poured himself a cup of brewed root bark tea, its earthy bitterness cutting through the lingering tension in his muscles. Outside, the storm screamed across the trees. Then, something thudded. Heavy. Not snow. Not a tree branch. He paused. Another sound, this one sharper, like metal scraping stone. Corvin moved slowly, setting the cup down. The rifle was leaning by the door. He didn't like using it, just owning it was a grim necessity in this age. But there were enough wandering scavvers, rogue bots, and desperate outcasts to make it unwise to go without. He stepped onto the porch, his breath fogging the air. Snow whipped past his face in erratic bursts. First, he saw nothing. Then he heard it again, ragged breathing. Near the tree line, his boots crunched on the frozen soil as he followed the sound, rifle at the ready. 10 paces in, he stopped short. Someone was sprawled across the snow. The figure was humanoid, but not entirely. Lanky, long-limbed, pale lavender skin, slick with melting frost. Armor plates peeled back like broken carapace, shimmering faintly with biolight. A long tail, bent at an awkward angle, dragged behind the form. And despite the brutal weather, unmistakably she, had no protective mask. Just a battered, open-breathing socket near her neck, wheezing faintly. Alien. Corvin exhaled slowly, lowering the rifle a few inches. Her eyes fluttered open, iridescent and oval, the color of violet flame. She saw him, tried to speak, then blacked out. He swore under his breath. For half a second, he thought about walking away. But only for half a second. She was bleeding. He holstered the rifle and moved toward her, kneeling in the snow. Up close, she was even more surreal. Her skin had fine ridges like faint scales, and her hair, what little of it there was, seemed like silk thread coiled behind her neck. She wore a crest pendant near her collarbone, partially buried under frost and mud. A name, maybe, a rank. He didn't know. Her body was unnaturally cold. Corvin hooked his arms under her and lifted. She was heavier than she looked, but still manageable. She didn't stir again. Back at the cabin, he cleared the cot and lowered her onto it, stoking the central stove to life. He didn't know her physiology, couldn't risk heat shock. Instead, he wrapped her in layered blankets, checked her pulse, fast, faint, and then did the only thing he could. He waited. 3 hours passed. She awoke with a jolt, nearly clawing out of the blankets. "Easy," Corvin said, backing away with his hands up. "You're safe." Her eyes darted. "Where?" "My place. You crashed during the storm." She tried to sit, then winced as pain shot through her side. "You're human." "Correct. And you took me in?" He hesitated. "Wasn't going to leave you out there." Her expression contorted into something between confusion and disdain. "Foolish. Your kind would be executed for harboring an AR scout." Corvin folded his arms. "You're not very good at thank yous, are you?" She didn't respond. "What's your name?" he asked. She stiffened, then said quietly, "Virelin." "Corvin." She looked at him, gaze narrowing. "Are you with the Eastern Accord?" "No. Independent." She relaxed a fraction. "Then you might live through this." "That's comforting." He brought her warm broth, vegetable-based, nothing too alien to her system. She sniffed it suspiciously. "You think I poisoned it?" "You don't know me," she said plainly. "Likewise." Still, she drank it. Slowly. Her hands were shaking. When she finished, she stared into the empty bowl like it held answers she wasn't ready for. "Why help me? You're not a medic. Not military. You gain nothing. I was raised better than to let someone die in a snowstorm, alien or not." She looked at him as if that were a foreign concept. In the days that followed, her injuries healed with startling speed. Corvin learned her body metabolized differently, faster cell regeneration, but sensitive to earth-based bacteria. He built a small sterilization field around her cot using one of the scavenged emitters from a broken drone. Varellin rarely slept deeply. She would jolt awake from half-dreams, fingers twitching toward phantom weapons. She said little, answered less. Corvin gave her space. But he noticed things. She didn't like enclosed rooms. She flinched at certain noises, wind chimes, metal scraping wood. And once, when he asked her if she remembered the crash, her jaw clenched. "I wasn't shot down," she said. "I was fleeing my own." He didn't press further. They fell into a pattern. He cooked. She cleaned what she could. When her strength returned, she helped him gather fuel and repair his small hydroline array. She didn't speak much, but her silence wasn't hostile, just guarded. One evening, during a particularly clear night, they sat outside near the fire pit. The stars were bright enough to cast faint shadows. "You miss it?" Corvin asked. "Miss what?" "Your people. Your home." She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes locked on a constellation he didn't recognize. "There are days," she said, "when I miss what I thought it was. But that place, that life, it tried to erase me." He nodded slowly. "I understand that more than you think." They shared the quiet. After a long moment, she said, "Your species values touch, contact, closeness." He smiled. "We do. I was taught it was weakness." "What do you believe?" She turned her face toward the fire. The glow reflected in her violet eyes. "I think maybe it's strength in disguise." A week later, he found her curled up in the corner of the living room, clutching her crest pendant, body shaking. She didn't notice him at first. "Varellin." She looked up, startled, furious with herself for being seen like this. "Go away," she whispered. Instead, he sat beside her, careful not to touch. "You're safe here." Her lips trembled. "I don't believe in safe." "Then believe in me." She let out a sound that was almost a laugh, broken, uncertain. "Why?" she asked. "You took me in. You fed me. You healed me. Now you sit beside me like we're bonded." "We're not bonded," he said gently. "We're just here, together. You don't owe me anything, Varellin." She looked at him, voice raw. "You took me in, and now you expect me to lie beside you?" The words were defensive, bitter. She stayed. But beneath them was something else. Fear. Vulnerability. Corvin's voice was quiet. "I don't expect anything. But if you chose to, I wouldn't turn you away." She stared at him like he'd said something unthinkable. Then she looked away. "I don't know how to be close." He reached out, not touching her, just offering his hand. "Open. Still. You don't have to know. Just stay." And she did. The storm returned on the fifth night. Louder this time, with sleet pounding against the roof like it was trying to dig through. But inside the cabin, the silence had shifted. Varellin no longer flinched when Corvin stepped near. She didn't snap back when he asked about her health. She even took to sitting at the table while he prepared meals, her curious eyes watching how he handled the old cookware like it was sacred ritual. "You clean the knife after every cut," she observed once. "Habit," he replied. "My mother used to say a dirty blade ruins the next piece." "Is that wisdom or superstition?" He chuckled. "Both, maybe." Varellin said nothing for a long while, then added quietly, "We used to sharpen blades after each mission. Edge, weight, balance, it had to be perfect. I think I liked that part. There was peace in it." He glanced up from the chopping board. You miss being a soldier? She shook her head. I miss knowing who I was. There's a difference. That night, Corvin lit the lanterns earlier. The power grid had become erratic. One of the towers farther up the mountain range must have collapsed again. But it didn't matter much. Warm light, quiet room, the hum of wind outside. Varellin stood near the window watching the storm. Your world doesn't make it easy, she said. And yet you endure. Corvin sipped from a dented mug. We're stubborn like that. Do you think that's why we lost? He raised a brow. You're not exactly losers, Varellin. Most humans would still call this war a stalemate. She turned toward him, eyes reflecting the lantern light. No, we lost. Not because of weapons. Not because of strength. But because you don't break the way we expected. Corvin leaned back in the chair, letting the words hang. You know, he said slowly, we thought the same of you. Her brow lifted. When the first Armari cruiser dropped over Melbourne, all our analysts thought you'd fold quickly. Too rigid. Too hierarchical. They thought you'd shatter once command was compromised. And did we? No. You adapted. Just not fast enough. The silence between them wasn't hostile. Not anymore. It was layered. Wary maybe, but honest. She joined him by the table and sat down, fingers folding over the hem of her sleeve. I dreamed last night, she said, almost reluctant. I was back on the orbital platform. My handler was there, Commander Xerix. He told me I was defective. Corvin frowned. Because you left? Because I hesitated. She stared at her hands. He sent me on a final sweep mission, just one more patrol, he said. No contact, no risks, but he knew. He knew I was questioning. You think it was a setup? I know it was. And when you were shot down? They didn't bother to recover me. Corvin didn't speak right away. He looked at her then. Not just at her face or body, but at the way she folded in on herself, like someone used to being abandoned. He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers gently. Varellin stiffened, but she didn't pull away. Later, as the wind howled like a beast outside the walls, she lingered near the fire while he prepared the sleeping arrangements. The cot she'd used was too cold again. No matter how many blankets he added, her body had trouble retaining heat on its own during storms. You'll freeze there, he said, nodding to it. She crossed her arms. What's your suggestion? He hesitated. You can take the bed. I'll sleep near the stove. Her expression darkened. You pity me? No, he said quickly. Because I won't be pitied. You're not, he said firmly. You're respected. That made her pause. She stepped closer, her voice low, quiet enough to be almost lost under the wind. If I said I didn't want to be alone tonight, would you think I was weak? He met her gaze. No, I'd think you were brave enough to ask. She inhaled slowly. The decision came heavy, like she'd carried it for days. I don't know how to share space, she admitted. Not like this. I'll follow your lead. They moved to the bed together. First, it was stiff. Her limbs curled in tight, tucked far to one side. Corvin stayed on his half, careful not to cross that invisible line between comfort and intrusion. The warmth of the thick blankets slowly drew their bodies into mutual presence, if not yet full closeness. She spoke softly into the darkness. You breathe slower when you're calm. He blinked. You've been listening to me breathe? Your rhythms are different, but soothing. He didn't quite know what to say to that, so he just smiled. Eventually, her form eased. She turned slightly toward him. Do humans bond this way? She asked. Sometimes, he replied. Sometimes it starts with less. Sometimes it becomes everything. Her hand found his under the blanket. Tentative, unsteady, but it stayed. If this means everything, she said quietly, promise me you won't betray it. He closed his fingers around hers. I promise. The wind screamed louder, but inside it was warm. They began moving as one after that. Not lovers, not yet, but something that carried weight. A shared gravity. They cooked together, cleaned together, even read old books by firelight. Corvin found a translator patch for her so she could read the human texts aloud, halting, sometimes confused, but fascinated. One evening, she asked about poetry. He handed her a slim, torn volume. "Try this." She read slowly. "I do not love you as if you were salt rose or topaz. I love you as certain dark things are to be loved, in secret, between the shadow and the soul." Her voice stumbled on the words, but there was reverence in her tone. "Who wrote this?" she whispered. "Pablo Neruda. He must have been one of your high priests." Corvin laughed softly. "Poets don't get much worship these days. Then your species has forgotten something important." That night, she reached for him under the covers. Not with hunger, but with need. He held her close, letting her adjust. Letting her learn what it meant to be beside someone not as a tactic, not as duty, but as choice. Her breath warmed against his neck. "I'm afraid," she murmured. "Of what?" "That I'll need you too much." He wrapped his arms around her, steady and sure. "Then we'll figure it out together." She clung tighter, and for the first time since falling from the sky, Varellin allowed herself to sleep in someone's arms. The early thaw brought with it more than melting snow and cracked river ice. It brought signals. They started small. A flicker in the old comm lines Corvin kept half-buried behind the tool shed. Then a burst of encrypted ARMARI chatter, just faint enough to miss unless you were listening. Varellin was. She froze halfway through slicing dried fruit, eyes snapping toward the distant sound like a predator. Corvin noticed instantly. "You okay? There's a ship nearby. Too close." He set down his knife. "One of yours." She shook her head. "The encryption's old. Tier 6 combat scouts. Not elite. Not mine." Her voice lowered, tense. "But they'd recognize me. I don't know what their orders would be." Corvin exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, hiding here isn't going to stay an option for long." Varellin didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked outside barefoot into the still cold mud, her eyes locked on the tree line like she expected something, or someone, to come barreling through it. When she came back in, her skin was blotched blue from the chill, but her mind had already moved to war mode. "I need a plan," she said, not quite looking at him. "We need a plan," Corvin corrected softly. She stopped. "You're not in this alone anymore, remember?" Her lips parted. Something flickered in her eyes. Resentment. Maybe. No, not resentment. Fear. The raw kind. The kind someone only shows when they've grown used to carrying burdens no one else can understand. "If I stay," she murmured, "they'll find you too. Humans who harbor ARMARI aren't treated lightly." He took a slow breath. "I'm not harboring you. You're living here. There's a difference." "You think they'll care about the nuance?" "No," he admitted. "But I do. That has to count for something." Varellin sat down heavily by the fire. The silence between them wasn't the soft kind anymore. It was tight, brittle, sharp. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Taking me in?" He didn't even hesitate. "Never." Her eyes shimmered, and he saw it again. That strange alien vulnerability she rarely let surface. "I didn't expect to feel this way. About you. About any of this. I didn't either. Back home," she whispered. "Our relationships were bred by rank and compatibility metrics. You didn't choose who to sleep beside. They assigned you someone with optimal hormonal match." Corvin winced. Sounds efficient. It was. But it wasn't real. Not like this. A beat passed. "Then why does real feel so terrifying?" she asked. He knelt beside her, taking her hand again, gently, deliberately. "Because now it matters." Her breathing hitched. Then the distant boom of atmospheric pressure broke the moment. A shuttle entering Atmo. Low, fast, too close to be anything but reconnaissance. They both moved at once. Varellin shoved aside the fur curtain and dragged the old camouflage tarp from the chest. "I'll need the uplink disruptor. If they scan the valley, they'll find anomalies." Corvin handed her the device from the old utility drawer, watching as she moved with purpose, trained, graceful, unhesitating. But beneath that calm was panic. Not fear for herself. Fear for him. Let me go to the ridge, she said. Draw them off. No, Corvin. We do this together. I told you. I'm not letting you walk into danger alone. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, but he cut her off. You came to me half dead in a storm, Varellin. I didn't turn away then, and I'm sure as hell not doing it now. Let me help you. She closed her eyes tightly, then nodded. They hiked to the ridge under twilight's cover, both cloaked in worn gear and tension. Corvin carried an old blaster, hardly military grade, but it could stun a mid-tier recon soldier if aimed right. Varellin took point, her steps soundless even on the wet brush. From the ridge they saw it. A slim black Armari scout ship, tri-wing design, old model but still fast, had landed in the lower valley near the broken water tower. 3 figures in matte black armor moved in perfect sync, scanning, scanning, scanning. Varellin narrowed her eyes. They're hunting, she muttered. Not searching. They have a target. Us. No. Someone else. Corvin frowned. Wait, so they don't know you're here? She looked uncertain. They might suspect. Or they're tracing a distress signal. She tapped a glyph on her wrist pad. Her screen lit with a low beacon code. Her pod's transponder. Still faintly active. I disabled it. Guess it got clever. Corvin sighed. Let's disable it permanently. They looped around through the trees and returned to where her old pod lay half submerged in meltwater and moss. It was mostly rusted now, overtaken by nature's crawl, but the beacon still blinked faintly beneath the inner panel. Varellin knelt, muttering under her breath in Armari as she sliced the housing open and crushed the core with a boot. Silence. No more ping. But the scouts were already moving upslope, likely having followed the signal for hours. We need to make a choice, Corvin said, watching the figures move. Run or mislead them. If we run, they'll track us. You're not fast enough on foot. Gee, thanks. She didn't smile. Then she looked at him, long and hard. I could surrender. No. It's tactical. It's suicidal. They wouldn't kill me outright. I wouldn't let them take you. She stepped closer. Corvin. I mean it. His voice broke slightly. I know I'm not your soldier or bonded mate or whatever your people call it, but I care about you. I need you. She reached up and touched his cheek, fingers cool and trembling. And I never wanted to care for someone. Not like this. The moment stretched again. War and love in collision. No easy way out. Then Corvin's eyes narrowed. What if we don't run or fight? Varellin tilted her head. We invite them. She stared. Show them we're here, but make it look like you're already integrated, under human asylum. That would only work if you were marked as bonded to a human, he finished. She blinked slowly. It's a sacred rite. Symbolic. Intimate. Well, he said softly. I already sleep beside you. Her lips parted slightly, breath hitching. And you'd claim me? She asked, voice hoarse. In a heartbeat. Her eyes burned gold for a second, emotional overload by Armari standards. Then she nodded. The rite was simple in execution, complex in meaning. She etched a sigil on the inside of Corvin's wrist using a ceremonial blade from her pod, just shallow enough to draw blood, not pain. Then she pressed her palm against it, letting her own blood mix. Their foreheads touched. A pulse ran between them, not psychic, not magical, but real. And when they stood together on the ridge again, arm in arm, their bond flaring in subtle Armari scent markers and human body heat, the scouts slowed. One scanned them. Then, without a word, the trio turned and retreated toward their shuttle. Varellin's breath was tight. They left. Corvin grinned. Guess they respect tradition. She didn't smile at first. Then she did. It was hesitant, small, but real. Maybe this bond is more powerful than we thought, she whispered. Corvin pulled her closer. Or maybe we are. Let me know when you're ready for Section 4. The conclusion will dive deeper into their relationship, explore how others react to their bond, and wrap up with warmth, emotion, and a future worth fighting for. You said, the day after the scouts departed, the world seemed quieter. It was as if the air itself had taken a collective breath and released the tension that had been building for days. In the valley below, the shattered remnants of the scout ship's landing site were no more than an empty scar on the earth. Their departure had been swift and, for all intents and purposes, without further incident. The bond they had forged in the last few hours, one of shared risk, shared strength, was the key to their survival. Corvin could feel it now, in every touch, in every glance. The sigil on his wrist throbbed faintly with a pulse he could feel even in his bones. Varellan's eyes were brighter, her movements more fluid, as though the very act of being together had changed something fundamental within both of them. She was still an alien, still bound to her heritage, but now she stood at his side with the same certainty that he had long felt toward her. It was the little things, like when she slipped her fingers into his, as they sat at the fire that evening, the glow of the flames casting long shadows over her face. They had dinner in silence, but it was a comfortable silence now, the kind that spoke of shared moments and unspoken understanding. She no longer looked at him with the caution she once did, as though waiting for him to reveal his true self or betray his kindness. There was something different now. "Do you miss it?" he asked her quietly, watching the flickering flames dance in her eyes. "Home, I mean." Varellan paused, chewing thoughtfully on the roasted root she had prepared. Her gaze drifted to the dark horizon where the stars were beginning to burn through the fading dusk. "I miss the stars, the ones I knew as a child, the songs my people used to sing." She smiled softly, as if lost in the memory of them. "I miss my family, too, even though they never truly understood me." She turned toward him. "But I don't miss the rules, the hierarchy, the way everything was decided for us." Corvin nodded, his thumb gently rubbing the back of her hand, where their bond marked them both. "I think I understand that." His voice softened, as though the weight of his words might crack the fragile peace they had built. "Sometimes I wonder if we were both running from something. Me from my past, you from your future." She laughed, the sound light and free, carrying a note of something unburdened. "Maybe, but maybe we were both looking for something. Something worth fighting for." He met her eyes then, and something deep inside him surged. It was all too clear now. The fear he'd felt the day he took her in, the concern that kept him awake at night, wondering what would happen if the world found out about her. He had been afraid of losing something that he hadn't even realized he needed. But now, as they sat together on the edge of their small, firelit world, he realized he had found what he didn't know he was missing. She leaned in slowly, her breath warm against his face. He could feel her heartbeat now, synchronizing with his own, the pulse of their bond stretching taut, binding them tighter than before. She was no longer the alien warrior, the broken fugitive. She was Varellan, his Varellan. "I didn't expect it," she whispered, her lips brushing against his as she spoke. "This, you, us." "I know," he said, his voice low, breath hitching as her lips brushed against his again. "I didn't expect it either, but I think I'm glad it happened." Her eyes softened, a hint of vulnerability beneath the usual strength that radiated from her. "I don't know what comes next, Corvin. I've never had a future like this." "We make it," he murmured, his hand slipping around the back of her neck, drawing her closer. "Together. Whatever happens, whatever comes, we face it side by side." She hesitated, then nodded, her forehead resting against his. The coolness of the night air contrasted against the heat of their touch. In that quiet, fleeting moment, they were everything and nothing. Two people different in every way, but now irrevocably bound by something stronger than blood, stronger than anything they had ever known before. The stars overhead blinked lazily, unaware of the quiet promise being made beneath their gaze. Corvin kissed her gently, the bond between them flaring in response. It was soft, tender, a slow ignition of everything they had held back, everything they had both been afraid to admit. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to let go, to simply feel. She kissed him back, just as slowly, just as tenderly, and for a moment, there was nothing but the warmth of their shared breath, the flutter of their hearts in perfect synchrony. "We'll be okay," he whispered against her lips. Her answer was a soft sigh and the briefest of smiles. And for the first time, he believed it too. Weeks passed, and the world continued its slow march forward. News of the scout ship's failure to report reached higher circles, but Corvin and Varellin were already prepared for that. The time they spent together in the cabin only strengthened their resolve. Varellin was becoming more attuned to the rhythms of human life. Chopping wood, preparing meals, washing clothes, all with a grace and ease that surprised Corvin at every turn. She had learned to laugh at herself when she fumbled, and when she didn't understand something, she simply asked. For Corvin, it was as if the years of loneliness had been washed away, replaced by the warm, steady presence of someone who cared for him in a way that no one else had. They shared everything, the burdens of the past, the worries about the future, and the joys of the present. It wasn't always easy, but together, they found a way to make it work. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a golden light, Corvin looked out over the valley. Varellin stood beside him, her hand slipping into his. She didn't say anything, but he could feel her presence like a quiet song in the air. "I think," he said slowly, breaking the silence, "I think this is home. With you." Her gaze softened, and she leaned her head against his shoulder. "I think it is too." In that moment, under the fading light of another day, they both knew that no matter what the future held, they had already found what they had both been searching for: a place to belong and someone to share it with.